Daf Vav Amid Aleph, a few lines into the page. The Gemara had said yesterday that Rav Gamliel and his Bezdin made a gzeira that a kuti cannot shecht. Even if Yisrael is watching, they cannot, kutim are out. They can't shecht at all. So the Gemara wants to know, what is the basis of this gzeira? As we're going to see today, they basically discovered that the kutim are not as firm as they thought they were. So the Gemara says, "My time agazu be'Rabbanan." Why is it that Rav Gamliel's Bezdin made a gzeira asering the kuti's shchita? Ki yad Rishim ben Elazar shadr Rav Meir. Because the following story: Rishim ben Elazar once sent Rav Meir lasui chamra be'kuti, to bring wine from the kutim. Again, this is at the time where they were treating them as Jews, so they went to go buy some wine. Ashkichehu Saba. There was an old man. Taisa says that throughout Shas, whenever it says Ahu Saba, Taisa over here says Yesh Mefarshim Dechomakim Shumazker Ahu Sabu Elio. Now there is one place. It's actually appropriate. We just had Lag Baimer. Shim Ba'Yechai, the whole Ma'aseh of Shim Ba'Yechai. At the end of the story, there's an old man who ridicules Shim Ba'Yechai for trying to metahar a makom, whatever it is. So Taisa says that obviously is not Elionavi, that Hahu Saba, but outside of that Gemara, every time it says Hahu Saba, some say that it's Elionavi. So Bekitzer, Rav Meir is going to buy wine from the Kutim, and Hahu Saba, Elionavi, says to him, it says, V'samta sakin belacha imbal nefesh ata. Put a knife to your jaw if you're a man of spirit. So basically what this means is be strong. He's basically saying don't buy wine from them. Be very, very stark. Meaning, as we'll see in a moment, what this pasuk is actually referring to is basically that if you're Rebbe, it basically means refrain yourself. So the Gemara is going to explain. The pasuk shot of the pasuk in a moment will say is that if you have a Rebbe who you know doesn't know the answer, stop asking him. Don't put him on the spot if he's not sure. And if it really bothers you, then just leave. But he paraphrased this pasuk in this way to say to him basically, be strong. Don't get wine from them. So halach Rav Shimon. Now this pasuk again, he never said it outright, don't buy wine, but he said this pasuk. So halach Rav Shimon ben Elazar v'sipur tvarim l'fnei Rav Meir. So Shimon Elazar told Rav Meir this. So v'gazar aleim, and Rav Meir, after hearing this, made a decree that they will not, that their wine is a problem. My taima, because what meaning? In other words, that he looked into it and he investigated. He made a gzeira that the kutim wine is out. What happened? What did they find? They found that on the top of Har Grizim, the Kutim built a dove. And they did it was a statue, and they were doing Avodah Zarah. Now, even though, so you have like the Kutim to start with were already always kind of tricky, but at least they felt that they were very frum, at least in certain areas. Once Rav Meir found that there was Avodah Zarah, public Avodah Zarah, the Kutim, he's like, they're done. Now, even though the majority of the Kutim were not Ovid Avodah Zarah, but Rav Meir L'Shitasei throughout Shas is always Chaysh L'Miuta. Rav Meir is always Chayshish for the minority. So because he saw the minority of the Kutim are Ovid Avodah Zarah, and the rest of the Kutim are not makbid on Teresh Bal Peh, he's like, we're done. So says the Gemara, Rav Meir, Taim Le, the Chaysh Miuta, the Gazaruba Ata Miuta. So now Rav Meir aser the wine. So Rav Gamliel Bezdina Namikra Meir Sfilu. So Rav Gamliel jumped on that and aser the shchita as well. So this is the gezerah of Tanoim to aser the wine and the shchita of kutim. Now, before we continue in the analysis of the kutim, the Gemara just wants to know, what does this pasuk actually mean? It says again, put a knife to your jaw, and if you're a man of spirit, in other words, like a knife to your jaw is like a lashon of like restraint and strength. So Eliyahu meant to say basically hold off on the wine, but what is the pasuk actually referring to? So the Gemara says Pasha degrab maiksiv. What is the pashup shot of the pasuk? So B'talmid yoshev nei Rabbi. It's referring to a student who's sitting before his Rabbi. The Tani Rav Chia ki seishev lil chamis Moshe. When you eat bread with a ruler, it means when you're sitting with a Rabbi. Bein tavin eis hashel lefanecha. Analyze and contemplate that's before you. V'samta sakin balacha in bal nefesh atam. Put a knife to your jaw if you're a man of spirit. What does this mean? What it's telling a student is as follows. That if a student is sitting before his Rebbe, and whatever he asks the teacher, the meaning is he knows that his Rebbe is able to explain things to him, so then, Bain, meaning ask questions. Meaning if a student, if he knows that his Rebbe is able to explain, don't sit quietly. No, ask and gain information. But V'im lav, but what if you know that your Rebbe does not know how to explain it? Then tavin es hashel lefanecha v'samti sakin b'lecha. Then contemplate that which you have, meaning think about what he taught you, and then put a knife to your jaw. Meaning, in other words, then hold back. Don't ask him questions if you know he's not going to explain it to you well. then you're just putting him on the spot to embarrass him. But if, let's say, you're someone who can't do this, like I can't sit at a shir and not fully grasp it, then parish himenu, then go to another shir. And then separate. If you're able to actually gain the information from him and it doesn't frustrate you that he's not able to explain it fully, and he's not, by the way, I don't think it means explain it fully that he can't explain the concept. It means he can't answer shilas. You can ask kashas on taisus. He doesn't know that. So if you can gain what you want to gain, good. If not, go to another shir. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak, huh?
What's he saying? He's saying that you got just to leave?
No, leave. It's better to leave. If it's going to bother you, then leave. Says the Gemara, huh? So says the Gemara like this. Okay, so you have Rav Gamliel and Rav Meir, Aser, the Shchita, and the wine of Kutim. So the Gemara says the following story. Rav Yitzchak ben Yosef, Shadri Rav Avo. Rav Yitzchak ben Yosef sent Rav Avo. These are Amoraim now, not Tanoim. La'asui Chamra Beikuti. A very similar story. He was sent to go bring wine from the Kutim. So Amar Lei, Eshke Husaba, again Eliyahu Navi meets Rav Avo, and Amar Lei, less kan Shomer Torah. Kutim are not Shomer Torah mitzvahs. Don't drink wine from them. Like basically outright, they're not Shomer Torah mitzvahs. So Halach Rav Yitzchak v'Sipur Darim Fnei Rav Avo. The word got back to Rav Avo. Halach Rav Avo v'Sipur Darim Fnei Ravami v'Ravasi. The word got back to Ravami v'Ravasi. V'Loizaz Misham Chasov Kecham Gemurim. And they made a gzeira. The Kutim are goyim legamri. Goyim legamri. Now, lamai. Now, what does it mean that they're goyim legamri? Here's the question, though. So they're going to get wine. I thought Rav Meir and Rav Gamliel asered wine already. So it's like they had to make another gzeira that they're goyim gemurim. So first of all, what does it mean that they're goyim gemurim? But we'll add that. But why was there a need to make a gzeira? I thought there already was a gzeira. Rav Meir and Rav Gamliel already asered the wine and the shchita 200 years ago. So why does Rav Avo need to do it again? So it says the Gemara, Ila shchita v'yayin nesach mihasim gosu b'rabban. I thought it was already nigzar. The answer is, as we find many times throughout Shas, inu gazer v'loy kiblu minayu, aser v'amivasi gazer v'kiblu minayu. Rav Gamliel and Rav Meir's gzeira did not stick. For gzeira to be chal, you need Rav of Klal Yisrael to hold on to it. It was never really attached. Mefarshim explained different reasons. It could be because at the time of Rav Meir and Rav Gamliel's Gezerah, people were closer to the Kutim. The Kutim were a stronger faction, and maybe at the time it was more difficult for Klal Yisrael to basically cut ties. But at the time Rav Mirvasi, it was a lot easier. But Bekitzer, there was an original Gezerah, but it didn't spread. Rav Mirvasi reinforced that original Gezerah, and then it stuck. Now,
there was no concerns on the Kashrus authority that in those days.
Yeah, I guess.
They were like, we want
Yeah. So now here's the Shiloh, though. It says that Rav Mirvasi made them goyim gemurim. So the purpose of the Gzer was to asa the shchita and the wine. But it said that they did more than that. They mamish made them like goyim. In what halacha are they like goyim? We know you say like goyim, so you can't touch the wine. But they asked the wine, they asked the shchita, but they did something more. It's obviously more than this. Call them goyim gemurim. There's a specific halacha that they mamish made them like goyim, not shchita, not yayin nesach. There's something on top of that. So what was it referencing to? So the Gemara says, "My gemurim." What does it mean that they made them like goyim? So I'll tell you outside the halacha before we see it inside. There's a concept called bittul rishus and nesinas rishus. What it basically means like this: the concept of an eruv is you have a chutzner, right? You have let's say 10 of us. Our house is all open to a communal yard. So technically, on a biblical level, I can carry. Now, my house is privately mine. The yard is owned by all of us. Now, technically, on a biblical level, I can carry from my house to the yard because it's not Rosh Hashanah. Right? It's Rosh Hashanah, it's Rosh Hashanah that's in Isser. This is not Rosh Hashanah. This is just privately owned, but it's multiple family-owned property. Chazal felt that it was a concern that if we allow you to carry from this to that, you're just going to go to Main Street. So basically, Chazal required that you have to set up an Eruv Chatzeres. The premise of an Eruv Chatzeres is each person contributes a little bit of food, but the mechanics of it is that all 10 of us are giving over the property to one person. So it's all privately owned. It's going from a private property, single-owned community, to a single-owned community. That's basically what we're doing over here. Now, what happens if on Shabbos we realize Menashe didn't do it? He refused to join us. He's from Jew, but he refused or he forgot, whatever it is. So now it's no longer privately owned. The whole premise of the chutzner only works if it's only owned by one person. Now it's owned by two people. It's owned by the 9 of us in a joint we gave over, let's say, all our rishus to Gavin, but Menashe didn't. So now it's owned by two people. So what do you do? So on Shabbos, a Jew is able to say, I'm giving over my rishus. I relinquish my rights. Now, whether he can carry or not, I don't think so, but now everyone else can carry. He's relinquishing his rights. You could do that even on Shabbos. You don't need a kinyan. Now, the halacha is that that's only true by a Jew. A guy cannot do that. A guy cannot on Shabbos just say, I'm mevatel my rishus. A guy has to actually rent out his property with a proper kinyan. You have to go, make a kinyan, and say, we are kaina the property from the guy in Erev Shabbos. That's a special halacha. That the whole Nesinas Rishus does not help. So the point is, when they made kutim like goyim, it means they're no Jews anymore. They're goyim. Meaning, a kuti cannot just give over his domain on Shabbos and say, I'm mevatel rishus. You have to actually be koinet with a schirus, Erev Shabbos, like a guy. That's the halacha.
Is this like on the area where to define a real goy is this halacha?
It's interesting. This is like the highest standard. Because the other ones you could just say are like, okay, we don't trust them to touch the wine because that's of a concern of Avodah Zarah. So even a Yid can be over Avodah Zarah. This is mamish, a goyish, a halacha, that you can't give over your rishus. This is something special for goyim, and the mamish put them in. Yeah, this is. It seems like it. So says the Gemara, "My oivik gemurim amar nachma yitzuk levatel rishus v'litin rishus for the laws of bittul and nesinas harishus by Iruvi Chatzeris. Ukidetanya, as the Brisa says, Yisrael Mummer, Mishamer Shabbos B'Shuk. If you have a Jew who privately doesn't keep Shabbos, but publicly keeps Shabbos, so he's not the firmest Jew in the world, but he's Shomer Shabbos publicly, so then he's still a Jew. Mevatel Rishus v'Naisin Rishus. Then even on Shabbos, he could be Mevatel the Rishus. B'Sheiner Shomer Shabbos B'Shuk, but if someone is Mechal Shabbos publicly, then he's a guy. What do you mean he's a guy? He can't just cede his rights and he can't join them. What does he have to do? A guy, you have to actually rent the property from him, and a Jew who's Mechalel Shabbos or a Kuti has the same status of a guy. Now, Ketzad, how does a Jew relinquish his rights? Not a guy, but how does a Jew do it? So, Amar Loi, even on Shabbos, he says, Rishusi Kanuyalach, Rishusi Mevatelis Lach, Kana, Vein Sarach Lazakas, you don't need a kinyan. Okay. Now, the Gemara says the following story. This is based on the concept that we had yesterday, which is, we referenced this yesterday, that tzaddikim, Hashem would not have a tzaddik ever, God forbid, even accidentally eat something. And if a tzaddik eats something, that means they look into, there must be a heter. Because Hashem would not, even if he's not aware of it, Hashem would not be nichshol the tzaddik. It says the Gemara, Rav Zera v'Ravasi ikla lepundika deyoi. Rav Zera Ravasi visited a pundik in Yai, a certain place. They brought a dish of eggs mixed with wine. Now here's the halacha. Demai is a rabbinic prohibition on all fruits and vegetables and products that require Trumas and Maisis to be separated from someone who is an Amaretz. And Amaretz were concerned rabbinically that they didn't separate Trumas and Maisis. You have to separate Trumas and Maisis as well. The wine of Yai was a city where they're all Amaratzim. So it's all demai. It's rabbinically a problem. Our discussion over here is going to be what happens if the demai is mixed in. It's not a cup of wine that you're drinking. You for sure have to separate Trumas and Maisis, but it's mixed into the dish. Did Chazal aser demai in a ta'aruvas, in a mixture? That's the shaila. It could be Chazal. Again, this whole thing is a creation of Chazal. Chazal were only strict when demai was, as they say, be'en, on its own. But when it's mixed in, it's fine. That's the discussion.
What was that to do with the city of Amarazim? Why Dafka there?
They were Amaratzim.
So what does that matter with the question of the mixture right now?
No, it doesn't. It's just saying that they
They
went to a city of Amaratzim. And they brought in front of him an egg dish that had wine of demai mixed in. So the Gemara says, Rav Zera lo yochal. Rav Zera refused to eat the dish because the demai is mixed in. Rav Asi yochal. Rav Asi ate it. So Amar Rav Zera Rav Asi lo yichayish l'mayla taruvas demai. So Rav Zera said to Rav Asi, "Why are you eating this dish? There's wine mixed in, no?" So Amar le lavadaita. He said, "I didn't think of it. I didn't realize there was wine. I didn't think of it. I didn't. My bad." Meaning not that he looked into it and he felt that it's mutter taruvis. He said, "I didn't think of it." So Rav Zera said, the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed him to eat it, must be there's a heter. So now they're going to look into it and they're going to find that there's a heter, that if the demai is mixed in, then it's taka, not a problem. No. They were not. They were Amaratzim. They were Shem Shabbos. They were just not makbid on Trumas and Maisus, but they were from Jews. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Zera, Efsher Gazur al Tarubas Demai Umestai Milster Rav Asi Lamechel Yisura. If this is taka a real problem, there's no way Rav Asi would have put in his mouth. Hashta behemtem shel tzadikim nekdesh baruch maybe takal yodan. Even a behem of a tzadik, Hashem protects. Tzadikim atzma lekol shekain. There's no way. There's got to be a heter. So he looked into it. Nafak Rezera Dak ve'eshkach. Rav Zera looked into it, and he says, Detanya, Halikeach yayin losis l'toich hamurius l'toich haluntis. If someone buys wine from an Amoritz, a bottle of wine on its own, with the intention of mixing it into a dish, karshina lasabin tchinin or vetch to make it into a dish, adashim lasabin resisim or lentils to make into a dish, chayim mishum demai. In all those cases, even though your intention is to mix it in, but you're buying it as a standalone product, of course you have to separate Trumas and Maisus. It's a classic demai issue. But hein atzman, but if you buy these finished products, i.e., you're buying a food that has demai mixed into it, mutarin, they're permitted, mipnei shein taruvis, because it's a taruvis of demai, and Chazal did not extend the iser to a mixture. Good. Now, from this until the end of the daf, we're going to lead us to discussion. So right now we're saying that if there's a mixture of demai in a dish, it's fine. So the Gemara says, "V'ligazur al taruvas demai." So this is me, no one else. "V'ligazur al taruvas demai," but they didn't mix in a mixture of demai. Meaning, if demai is mixed into a dish, it's fine. V'hatanya. Now the following brisa: Hanoisin l'shechentoi isa la'afoi sukder levashel. Okay, first case. I go over to a neighbor of mine. She is an Amaretz. I do not trust her. Everything that comes out of her house is demai. But here's the case. She happens to have an oven. I would like to use her oven. So I give her all the ingredients and I say, do me a favor, bake this for me. So the halacha is, it's mutter. What's the concern? We're not concerned that she took some of my product without telling me and put some of her materials in. Meaning, I'm showing up with all the raw materials to make bread. I'm giving her the flour, the yeast, whatever, etc. And then I say, hey, do me a favor, bake it for me. That's fine. What would the concern be? So of course it's fine. It's your ingredients. We're not concerned that while it's baking, she spilled some of it or stole some of it and then took some of flour from her house, which is demai, and put it in. We're not concerned. Okay. By the way, remember that point. We are not concerned that she took some of my raw materials and put it of her own. It's not like meat with a guy. Like we're not concerned of swapping out in general. But but let's say I tell her, listen, do me a favor, bake bread for me. I'm just buying her bread, her ingredients. Then meaning, I tell her, make me bread, and I say, use your own ingredients. Then then we're concerned about the leavening agents and the condiments as a problem of Shemitah. A problem of Shemitah and Mishum Meiser. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, in this case, we're not talking about, it's not all the, no, what are we concerned about? We're concerned about the yeast, right? The yeast is the problem. What are we concerned about exactly? We're concerned about the yeast. We're concerned about a mixture of the products. Let's say the condiments. I'm telling her to make me a dish, and I'm concerned that she uses the mustard. And I told her again. I said, make me a dish with with mustard and all that stuff. Make me a dish with mustard, whatever. So it's a problem. But we're not talking about where I'm eating the demai as is. It's all mixed in. What are we concerned about? The yeast, the mustard, whatever it is. These are products that are mixed in, and you see that it's a problem. Again, it's not. She's not giving me an apple. You understand? She's giving me a made dish where some of the ingredients are demai, and it's a problem. So why is that? Why is it? I thought Chazal's cool if it's a mixture. So No, but it is by the time I get it. Oh, so the Gemara gives two answers. The first answer, I think, is what you're saying. Shani asam dekivin dekamrle asem mishalechi commanda orav v'yadayim dami. First answer is because you're telling her to do it, it's worse than her doing it on her own. Meaning, if you happen to go to her house and she happens to have a cookie that she might have mixed in some item, then it's fine. But here you're telling her to do it. That's the akin to like you taking the product and mixing it in b'yadayim. Chazal, we're not cool with that. Meaning, you have to understand, you have to get into the mindset of Chazal. Chazal are not going to be super strict if it's mixed in. But for you to now tell her to use the ingredients, to mix it in herself, to command her to do it? No. Answer number 2, and this is also very negay for the laws of Bas B'chalav and Taruvis, things are batal b'shishim. Let me ask you a question. Do you think yeast is batal b'shishim? Let's say I put in 1% of yeast into a dough, into flour. You think it's batal b'shishim? It's technically less than shishim. Of course not. Why? Batal b'shishim means that I no longer can see the product. It's nullified in there. Yeast makes the whole product change physically. It's not batal. I'll give you another example. If I have, jalapeno, super spicy, whatever, of Isser that gets mixed in, you'll say, yeah, but it's batal b'shishim. Yeah, I taste it. It's not batal b'shishim. So over there also, what are we concerned about? We're concerned that she has yeast of Demai. Oh, it should be okay. It's mixed in. No, it's not. Mixed in means it's mixed in. The whole molecular product is changed because of it. It's not nullified. So we're more strict when you have an item that is very spicy or changes physically the whole thing. We're more strict. The Gemara says, Rafram Amar Shani Sar V'Tavan D'Lataime Ovid V'Taime Loy Batal. Okay. Now what you do see, and this is going to take us to the end of the daf, what you do see from here, this is an aside, and that is that in the first case, I'm giving her my ingredients, and I say, do me a favor, bake bread for me. I'm giving her everything. We said it's fine. And I told you, what's the chiddush? Of course it's fine. What would the concern be? The concern is, we're not concerned, but what could the concern conceptually be? We're not concerned that while she's baking, she took some of my ingredients without telling me and put some of her ingredients in. We're not concerned about that. What the Gemara is going to do until the end of the daf is basically pick cases where it's clear we are concerned about that. That the same way if I give meat to a guy unsupervised, we're concerned he'll swap my meat for his meat. There are cases within Amaretz where we're concerned she's going to take some of my product and put her product in. So how come over here you're telling me we're not concerned? There are cases where we are concerned. But each one, the Gemara is going to explain, those are the exceptions, and it makes sense why we're concerned about that. We'll go through it. The Gemara says, and you're not concerned that an Amaretz is going to take some of the raw ingredients and place it in. But there's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, okay, you have a person whose mother-in-law is an Amaretz. She's not makbid on Trumas and Maisus. The exact same case. I give her the raw ingredients, and I say, do me a favor, Ma, let me just bake it for me. You know what the halacha is? You have to separate Trumas and Maisus before you give it to her, because she's not going to do it. So you can't just say, you can't trust her to separate Trumas and Maisus. Then when you get it back from her, you have to separate Trumas and Maisus again. So why do I have to separate it again? Because it might be different ingredients than when you gave it to her. Again, I have all the raw ingredients. I show up to my mother-in-law's house. She's an Amaretz. Shem Shabbos, but she doesn't know much. The halach is I have to separate Trumas and Maisus before I give it to her, obviously, because I can't trust her to do it. But then when I get it back from her, I have to separate Trumas and Maisus again. So why? You already separated it once. Because it might be different ingredients. Because while it's cooking, what if the batch wasn't good? She might have swapped. It might be completely different flour, different yeast, different salt.
So why don't you just do it the second time?
Because you're not allowed to give, because in case she doesn't, you can't, what if she eats from it? You can't give her a product on Trumas and Meiser because she's not going to do it. And what if she eats from it, God forbid, in Nechshel her? A chaver never gives a product outside of his domain that's not finished. So you have to separate Trumas and Meiser before you give it to her, but then you have to do it again when she gets back. Why? Because it might be different ingredients. Wait a minute, I thought we're not concerned. Says the Gemara, because we're afraid that while she was baking, something went wrong with the dish. She screwed up the first time. She had to throw out the entire dish. Then she rebaked it with her own ingredients. So you see that we are concerned. Do you understand the kasha? Before, we're not concerned about swapping out the raw ingredients, but now we are concerned. So the Gemara says, Hasam kidiktani taima. Over there, it's the exception. Why? Over there, the Gemara clarifies why we're concerned. Amar Rav Yehuda, roitzehi betakanas bita uboisha mecha sana. A mother-in-law, she wants her son-in-law to be impressed. And we're concerned the following. Normally, we're not concerned that a woman is going to take some of my raw ingredients and replace it with her own. But what happens if she's baking the first time and it's not a good dish, it's not a good batch? She wants to show off. She's worried about her daughter and her son-in-law. So what she's going to do is she's going to throw it out, get better ingredients from the store, and redo it. So normally we're not concerned, but in that case specifically, there's a legitimate reason to say that she's going to swap it out because it's her son-in-law. She wants to impress him. Says the Gemara, go to the next page. What about the following case? The exact same case, but instead of your mother-in-law, you're at an inn. So I'm staying at an inn, yeah? I go to the innkeeper and I say, listen, I got flour and yeast and salt. She's Amaretz. Do me a favor, keep bake it for me. So you know what the halacha is? The exact same thing. You have to separate Shumas and Meiser when you give it to her and when you get it back. Why? Because the entire ingredients she might have swapped the ingredients out. Same question though. Says the Gemara about the same question. Why over there by the innkeeper are you concerned? The Gemara says, I'll tell you why. The innkeeper has a reputation. Hasam Nami Maria Va'amra. Over there she'll rationalize why. Normally we're not concerned that she'll swap it out, but over there she'll rationalize as follows. Barbe Rav Lecha Chamima. Let the rabbinical student who's staying by me eat warm food. Vani Echel Karira. Meaning she wants to impress her guest, especially if the guest is a Talmid Chacham. She wants to, she has Hakaras Hatov, it's a guest of hers who's a Talmid Chacham. So she says if something goes wrong with the dish, she'll be like, I'll eat that and let him get the better food. Again, we're generally not concerned, but in that case specifically, there's another reason that she would rationalize it. One.
Sorry. But what do we solve the issue then that she's still eating the mine?
What's her choice? She's eating the all the time.
But why do we care about if the mother-in-law eats the mine more than
I do care about the same thing. I'm separating Maisa before I give it to her when I get it back. If she chooses to mess herself up, that's her problem. Let her hang on her own noose. That's not my problem. So it says the Gemara, and one more question. What about this last case? Vatanya, Eishes chaver teichenes im Eishes amaretz. Bizman shehi tmeya, avaloi bizman shehi tahara. Okay, the following case. You have Rachel and Leah. Okay, two neighbors. Rachel is a very frum woman. Leah, not so much. The halacha is, Leah calls up Rachel and says, hey, you want to grind corn or whatever, flour with me? I'm going to the grinder, you want to come with me? So halacha is that Rachel can go with Leah, dafka when Rachel is anida, dafka when she's tameh. Why? Because when she's tameh, she's already going to distance herself from touching food. She's not going to go near, because when they're tameh, they're very, very careful. But when she's tahar, here's the concern. When she's tahar, right? When women are tameh, especially back then, they would make sure she's like, listen, she's just going to put it down. She's not going to touch the ingredients. She's going to hand it to the guy. She's going to be very, very careful. She's not getting involved. She's tameh. When she's tahar, here's the concern. She's all in it. And she might take some of her friend's food accidentally, and like her friend's like, oh, you got to taste this fresh corn of mine, and she'll put it in her mouth. But her friend is an amaretz. So when she's tameh, it's fine because she's not going to touch her own food, let alone her friend's food. But when she's tahar, we're concerned about accidental. It's like milk and meat on the same table at the same time. Huh? No. If she did the avera, then it's one thing. She may not need tshuva. But if we're going to try to prevent her, it's the same thing with milk and meat. You can't have milk and meat on the same table at the same time because you're worried that you'll inadvertently grab a French fry. So to over here also, if she's tahar, we're concerned that she'll grab some of her friend's flour, accidentally put in her mouth, thinking it's hers, whatever it is. But Zakrav Shimon Elazar, af bismanshi tamei loy titchain. Shimon Elazar says, even when she's tamei, she shouldn't. Why? I thought when she's tamei, she's not going to put her hands in. Yeah, the answer is, Shimon Elazar says, she's not going to put her hands in, but you know what's going to happen? Her friend, Leah, who's not so from, is like, you got to try this, and she's like gonna mamish hand it to her. I mean, you're right. When she's tameh, she's out. She's not gonna grab it herself. But there's still a concern that her friend will give some of her own flour and give her to eat, and she'll forget and she'll eat it. I mean, her friend's gonna feed her. So it says the Gemara, Shimon Elazar, Omer, af bizman shitmei loy titchayin, because her friend Leah is gonna give some of the flour and eat it. Now, what's the point of this? What does it have to do with swapping out? What does that do? It's not a case of swapping out. The Gemara says the following svara. Is Leah allowed to do this? Is Leah allowed to give some of her flour to her friend to taste? You'll say, why not? Well, because we're thinking in 2026. This is not her flour, it's her husband's. So by definition, when she's giving some of her flour away without asking her husband consent, it's theft, which means she's willing to steal. If she's willing to steal her own, why wouldn't she steal her friend's? The Gemara is going to instantly respond that this is not theft, or even if it is theft, it's not theft in people's perceptions. Just because I'm willing to give some of my own, even though it's technically my husband's, that does not mean I'm willing to take my friend's without her knowledge. I'm not going to swap it out without her. You have to understand, every single time a woman swaps out someone else's ingredients with her own, even if she rationalizes, it's still theft. Without asking permission from someone, it's still theft. But it's rationalized theft. So the Gemara says, if she's willing to steal from her own flour to give her friend, wouldn't she steal her friend's flour? So the Gemara says, Hashta migzil gaza chalufi mibai. She's willing to steal herself. She'll probably steal her friends. The Gemara says, no. Rav Yosef, Hasam nami Maria Amra. It's not theft in her mind. She would never touch her friend's stuff without asking. But over here, she'll give some of her to her friend. Why? Isn't that theft? She didn't ask her husband. In her mind, it's not theft. I'll tell you why. She'll say, Torah Mareisha Ka'achel. She'll say, my husband would be so cool with it. You're helping me out with grinding. You walk me to the store. We're doing this together. You deserve to get a part of it. Meaning, in this case, Leah will rationalize why she's allowed to give some of her husband's grain to Rachel, because she'll say, Rachel came with me. It's only right. My husband would be cool with it. But there's no rationalizing taking someone else's product without their knowledge, and therefore, because they're willing to take their own, does not mean that they're willing to take someone else's. Let's just end with a Maisa. A Maisa goes like this.
This apply with each case is just with changing from man.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's a concern by a man generally to do this, but maybe. I don't know. I didn't see. So the Gemara just ends off with a Maisa. Hey, Rabbi Yeshua ben Zoruz ben Chamov Shor Rav Meir. Rabbi Yeshua ben Zoruz, the son of Rav Meir's father-in-law, said Lefnei Rav Meir. He said to Rav Meir, he said about Rav Meir, She'ochal Allah shel Yarek beBeishan, that he ate a vegetable leaf grown in Beishan without separating Trumas and Maisos. Now, what's the chiddush of this? Beishan was apparently an area. You only have to separate Trumas and Maisos in Eretz Yisrael. In Chutz La'aretz you don't. Biblical Eretz Yisrael is not so simple of what Eretz Yisrael is today. Just because something is, 1948 Israel does not mean that it's biblical Eretz Yisrael. Now don't do this. You can do the face by any time anybody says anything. The point is, Beishan was apparently a city that was debatable whether it was actual Eretz Yisrael or not. So, Ben Zoruz, or Yeshua Ben Zoruz said, I saw a mayor once take leaves from Beishan without separating Trumas and Maisos. In other words, Beishan is obviously not Eretz Yisrael. So based on that story alone, Hitir Rebbe is Beishan Kul Al Yadeh. Rebbe accepted that testimony to such an extent that he said, Beishan is now no longer, you don't need Trumas and Maisos from all of Beishan. Now, by the way, that's a chiddush. I'll tell you why. Because I could have heard this story going a little differently. I could have heard Rebbe saying, it's very nice that you said this, but maybe you missaw it, or what you're saying is a chiddush. No, you said it. We trust you. Your testimony is accepted. Beishan is now officially no more Trumas and Maisos, all of Beishan. They put up the Pashkavilan, it's out. So says the Gemara, Chavrulav Achiv Beis Aviv, Rebbe's brothers and fathers and his household ketem Amr Loi, Makim Shavesecha Va'aves Avesecha Nogu Bayiser. Your father and your grandfather and great grandfather separate Trumas and Maisos from Beishan. Ata Tinig Beheter. Now you're going to be Mekel. What's going on over here? So says the Gemara, Darashu Mikrazeh. So he said the following drasha. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu made a copper serpent that they would look at to heal them. But the pasuk says that Chizkiah Melech Yehuda destroyed it. Why? Because at that point people were doing Avodah Zarah to it. They were treating it as Avodah Zarah, so he destroyed the snake. And he called it Nachshutan because it was Machshol people. Fine. Here's the question. Chizkiah was not the first good king. His grandfather was a Yerishamayim. He came from Yerishamayim. His father was a Rasha, but his grandfather was Asa, who was a Yerishamayim. So how come Asa didn't get rid of it? So says the Gemara, how come Asa, his grandfather, his great-great-great-grandfather didn't destroy it? But Yeshafat, and Asa's son Yeshafat v'leibiru. So what's up, Pshat? They got rid of all of it, so why didn't they get rid of this snake? It must have been that it was a mistake on their part to leave it, but it was from Siyata Dishmaya, because Hashem wanted Chizkiah to have a name for himself. It's an interesting perspective. Meaning Hashem did it in such a way that he allowed it such a way for Chizkiah to have a platform to get rid of Avodah Zarah. It was basically the Ratzon Hashem. So to over here, just one more minute. So you know what? You're telling me we have two choices over here. I'm telling you I heard that Rav Meir didn't separate Trumas and Maisos from Beishan. So I'm telling you Beishan is not Eretz Yisrael. My grandfather felt it was Eretz Yisrael. His great-grandfather Eretz Yisrael. It was a mistake on their part. Why? Because Hashem was allowing me to have a platform to give this psak. Meaning, in other words, you find sometimes that later on in history, a a mistake of earlier generations will be revealed to allow the future generations to rectify that mistake. So Taka, my grandfather was being machmer shalei kedin. It wasn't necessary. It's not Eretz Yisrael. And Hashem allowed me, the same way Chizkiah was able to, Hashem orchestrated in such a way that he was able to be that one who did that. I'm going to be the one who's going to say it's not Eretz Yisrael. My grandfather, was Ratzon Hashem. You have new chidushim later on. Now, just to finish up, the Gemara says Mekan, but you do see from the story that they accepted Rav Yeshua ben Zorus's testimony, L'Talmid Chacham she'amar dvar halacha, that if a Talmid Chacham says a chiddush, she'ein mazichin loy, we don't retract it, meaning we accept his testimony. We don't say to Rav Yeshua ben Zorus, what are you talking about? Get out of here. If what he's saying, and he's a trustworthy person, even what he's saying is a chiddush, we accept it. Now, the first lashon is in mazichin oso, which means we don't retract it. V'amri some have a different lashon, in maznichin oso, we don't reject it. But Amrila in mazchichin also, and some we don't accuse him of being gaiva. They're all saying the same thing basically. We accept his testimony, but one said zichin, maznichin, and mazchichin. So the Gemara says, we'll end with this. It's all based on psukim. Man damar as mazichin. The one who says mazichin is based on the following pasuk: K'dichsev yizach hachoshen. It will not separate the choshen. So you see, mazichin is separation. Man damar in maznichin with a nun. Ki lo yiznach la'olam Hashem. Hashem will never reject Klal Yisrael. Man damar mazchichin with a ches. Titania mishirabu zuchuche halev. When those are gaiva, when the bali gaiva robu machlekes b'Yisrael. See, maschichin is a lashon of gaiva. I will stop here.